All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst here with Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do is talk with webmasters and publishers like the ones here in the Hangout. If any of you newer folks in the Hangout have any questions to start with, I'd be happy to jump on and go with those. Nothing special on your mind? Okay, well, if anything comes up in between, feel free to let me know. I went through the questions that were submitted and I kind of reorganized them a little bit, which was lucky because at the moment the Q&A widget doesn't seem to be working for me at all. It's an empty list, so I have my prepared list, and I hope it kind of matches what was actually submitted. So let me start here. My website added a new Robots.txt rule in April 2015. This month, we saw reports of Webmaster Tools showing that the rules were finally being honored and the correct pages being blocked. Robots.txt was properly formatted and uploaded. What's up with that? So in general, we recrawl a Robots.txt file pretty much every day for most websites. For some websites, we crawl them a little bit more frequently. For others, a little bit less frequently, but pretty much once a day. So you would be seeing the effects of a Robots.txt file change almost on the next day and next couple of days. You'd definitely be seeing that. And I think the important part here is the change that you would see is that we stop crawling the URLs that are blocked, and we might start crawling the URLs that are unblocked. But that doesn't mean that you'll automatically see a change in the URLs that are indexed in Robots.txt, because essentially URLs that are blocked by Robots.txt can still show up in the search results without the title, without the snippet, but they can still show up in the search results. So this is something where if you're trying to remove content from search and you're using Robots.txt, then maybe that's not the best approach, or at least the fastest approach, but rather maybe it makes sense to put a no index on those pages so that we understand that these pages should be removed from search as quickly as we can recrawl them. Do 404s need to be indexed or followed for Googlebot to crawl, or can we use no index, no follow? So 404 pages, we don't look at the content at all. You can put whatever meta tags you want on there. We'll essentially ignore that. When we see it's a 404, we'll drop them from our index. What happens if you have a different canonical on your URL? Which signal does Google pick up first? I've seen URLs indexed in the search results that have different canonical URLs specified. Does that mean Google ignores the canonical tag? So the canonical tag is essentially a signal for us to let us know that you prefer to have a different URL indexed. But we have to actually index and process that page in order to see the canonical tag. So what can sometimes happen is that we'll index a page, we'll process it, we'll show it in the search results, and when we recognize the rel canonical, we'll pick that up and try to focus on the other canonical URL. Another thing that might be happening there is that you specify a rel canonical, and we think that's probably not right, which might be because we have a lot of other signals that are in play there, where we have two URLs. You have one specifying a canonical, maybe the other one has a redirect back, maybe the internal links on a website might be pointing at the other URL, maybe the other URL is in the sitemap file. All of these things kind of add up, and based on these factors, we try to make a decision which one should be canonical. And that can sometimes mean that we pick one where you actually have a canonical pointing at a different URL. Question about search analytics. My site is showing up in position 3.5 for a very high volume term. If this was true, we'd see tons of traffic. We do show up in the image results. Are the image results a part of the ranking? So if you show up in the universal results within a web search results page, so kind of this images block on top or sometimes in between on the page, we do count that for Search Console as ranking on that page as well. So that might be a thing there. Another thing might be that you're just occasionally ranking for this term. So that could be from personalization, um, could be things like a specific location, specific country, and that's something where you might be ranking for a term that's very popular, but actually you're only showing up very, very rarely. So those are things which might have an effect on how we show your site like that.
John, is there any possibility that you add a way to see where the click is coming from, if it's coming from the image block, from the, I don't know, from other types of universal results?
Um, Maybe. I don't see that happening very quickly, but we're looking into making it easier to split it up, like where specifically on the results page you're showing up. So if you're showing up like in the featured snippet, or maybe as an AMP page in the AMP carousel, that you kind of have a little bit of an insight into where you were specifically showing up. But I don't think we would do that for all elements on a search results page. So I don't know, for example, that we would split out the image universal results, or maybe in the news block. I don't know if that makes sense to actually split it out separately.
It would, since there are some way different components of the search page. So it would be interesting to know, well, it came from the news that I made, or from that I appeared in the blog, in the news blog, or from, I mean, if you're going to use it for the AMP carousel, for example, I don't see why you wouldn't for the other types of blogs.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different blocks in the search results page, so that's sometimes not that easy.
Right.
But that's a good point. Yeah. Um, let's see. Next one here, I have a landing page which ranks highly for products that I don't sell anymore. I put other products on the page, tweak the content and title tags, but it still doesn't rank for the new keywords. It ranks for the old ones. What can I do instead? So normally, if you don't have a product anymore and you're not selling something specific anymore, generally makes sense to just make that a 404 page, so that we know this page doesn't exist anymore and we can focus on other pages within your website. If you have an equivalent product that you're selling, maybe you redirect to that specific product page. If you're just changing the content there, then I would expect, depending on how the old site was ranking, that to take quite a bit of time. So that's not something where I expect like just swapping out the content to automatically have that new content rank in the same way that the old one ranked. From Google's Eye, what are the 5 biggest SEO mistakes for any given site? Please don't delete this. So the don't delete part is actually one of the most critical things that we do see all the time, is that people accidentally put a no index on their site. And we see this for fairly large sites. We see this for smaller sites as well, where maybe they'll push a development version to their server and they forget to check for the no index meta tags. And suddenly the website has a no index on it. We find that while crawling, and we drop those pages from the search results. So that's pretty much, I'd say, the biggest mistake that can happen. Luckily, people are able to recognize this fairly quickly for the most part. Is that people are not all the time. Oops. Let me just see. For fairly large sites, we see this for smaller sites as well. I speak twice. Okay. We also see this a lot as a pattern for people who are trying to do something kind of too smart, almost. For example, when you have a landing page that lists all the different countries or all the different languages available, and you don't mark that up as an X default page in your hreflang pairs, and you just say, well, my home page should be no index. And then suddenly the most important page on your website, it has a no index on it. So that's something that's, I'd say, probably the biggest real problem that we see. there are, of course, lots of small technical details where I'd say, well, you could be doing this differently, you could be doing that differently, you could be structuring your site slightly differently. But when it comes to real mistakes that cause things to really disappear from search, no index is probably on the top of the list there. Robots.txt also kind of comes into play there. If we can't crawl it, we can't really rank that content. But for a lot of things, if you accidentally put a robots.txt up, then we can still rank your page itself. We don't have the title, but we can still at least rank that page. If I want particular pages to be deemed more important in Google's eyes, do I just need to have them linked more directly from the other pages, or what would you recommend? So in general, if something is seen as being more important for your website, if you think it's more important for your website, I'd make sure that it's very clearly more important for your website, so that when people visit your website, they recognize this as being important as well. That could be things like linking it from the home page, linking it from other related pages. All of these things really help to kind of drive the message to the user and to search engines that this is actually a pretty important part of your website, and you think this is great stuff, and you want everyone to take a look at it and to give it a lot of weight. So making sure that these things are linked properly from the home pages, from the category pages, for example, is a really good thing. Is listing a local address on the Contact Us page a ranking factor? Should all my international websites list a local address to have an SEO boost? Depending on the type of queries that people are doing, having a local address can definitely make sense. But it's not the case that you have to put a local address on any random website just because you're targeting users in that country. So I wouldn't go out and kind of rent a PO box from UPS and just place them randomly on your website, but rather think about, does this really make sense for users or not? And if people are explicitly looking for your local address, then I would certainly make sure that it's on your website. I've seen a lot of local business sites, for example, where the address isn't really directly visible, or where the address is kind of an image block, or the address is placed in a map that's also an image, essentially, that we can't really pick up. So those are things that are sometimes easy to fix, and they can give a little bit of value to your site. Editing knowledge graphs. We have multiple brands that are capable of being edited, but some can't. Can you talk about how Google is verifying the official site and how we become official if Google isn't IDing us as such? I don't actually have any specific information to share on that, but one thing you could do is post in the help forum about that specifically, and maybe give us an example or two, and then we can take that to the team to look at to see, are we looking at the right factors here, or should this be expanded somewhat, or maybe we should make sure that we're not showing editing things for some things that we are showing it. So that kind of feedback is really useful, but it's important that we have specific examples there. Some sites having first four, so some sites are shown in the first four search results and on a Google search results page. We think that's bad. Google should get their act together and fix that. So from our point of view, there's no absolute limit to the number of URLs that we would show from one site in the search results page. And that's something when we talk to the engineers, there are lots of different opinions on what we should be showing, how often we should be showing one site. For some queries, it might make sense to show that site a lot of times. So if someone is searching for your brand name and your website is this brand name, then maybe it makes sense to show a bunch of results from your site because that's a very relevant result. In other cases, maybe it makes sense to show fewer results, maybe one, maybe two from one site for specific queries. So that's something where I wouldn't say there is an absolute limit that Google needs to apply and kind of limit all the sites there, but rather what might be the case is that we're not getting the amounts right, or not getting them in a way that actually makes sense for the user. So sometimes that happens because we're kind of confused what the user is searching for. Sometimes that happens if we're confused about the website a little bit. But all of these cases are really useful to look at. So if you run across situations where you think we're showing too many results from the same site, by all means, give us that information so that we can look at those specific queries, look at those search results that we were showing there, and figure out what we need to do to improve those.
We used to see that a lot with, it's actually got better over time, but we used to see that a lot with exact match domains, where it's very hard to guess whether it's a brand or it's just the domain name. And because of the industry we're in, gifts.com used to have like the whole first page because their domain was gifts.com. So whatever gift you were searching for would come up. But the people weren't searching for that brand. They were clearly just searching for a gift.
Yeah.
So then we saw that being diluted over time. It definitely went from 10 down to 8, 6. There's maybe now a couple, but I guess it's almost impossible for you to determine what's a brand and what's just a website, what's just a keyword.
Yeah.
If they're searching for Travelocity plus something, then that's fairly obvious. But if it's just gifts, then it's almost impossible.
Yeah, yeah. I think those are really tricky cases. So those are the kind of things where having that kind of feedback for the team is really helpful, so that they can figure out, are we kind of mixing things up with the domain name or the company name that's actually not supposed to be ranking like that. So those are always kind of tricky cases that we need to figure out.
The problem is, it's from the user's perspective. In a lot of cases, they still find out what they're looking for because they did sell gifts. So it's not causing any problems other than to people that don't own that site. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
So you would only really get feedback from competitors, not unbiased users in most cases.
I think that's a unique edge case situation there. I think in a lot of cases we might actually show results that are actually not that great for users.
Okay.
If we make something up like that. So I mean, ultimately, if users are happy with those search results, and from our point of view, it doesn't really significantly change things to kind of swap things around there, then that's clearly hard to discuss with the team here. Because a lot of times when we go with specific queries to the ranking team, we try to show why this query is bad, and we try to show, well, the results that we're not showing or not showing on top are clearly much better than the ones that we are showing. Then that's something that's a lot easier to discuss, because then you can say, oh yeah, this is clearly a bug on our side, we need to fix it. But especially when we go to them and say, well, the results that we're not showing are just as good as the ones that we are showing, then they're like, well, why do we need to do anything? And that's often the case, for example, with maybe affiliate sites or other sites where the content is pretty equivalent. It's kind of the same stuff anyway. And people come to us in the forums and say, well, other sites with the same stuff are ranking. Why is my site not ranking? And when we bring that back to their team, they're like, well, if they're all the same, it's like, why should we change anything?
John, can I have a follow-up on that?
Sure.
So you previously mentioned that, for example, e-commerce sites that have products from their distributors and they all have the same product description, for example, that you'll try to choose based on the user's query, his location, and maybe other factors, you try to choose the best results to show and filter some of the others out. But what happens, for example, you have the blue widget product, and the user just searches blue widget, and that's it. It doesn't search for anything that would be in the product description, for example. How do you decide what to filter out and what not? Because you're still not showing all of the pages that feature the same product with the same description. You're still filtering out some, but it doesn't seem to be based on the content of the product description?
I don't know. I'd have to look at specific examples there. So that's sometimes that's easier. Sometimes that's trickier. If we can really recognize that the primary content is equivalent across these sites, then it probably makes sense to filter them out. If we can recognize that, for example, the snippet that we would be showing would be essentially the same for these different pages, then that's something where we can also say, well, it doesn't bring any additional value to the user to show these separately. So there are different things that could be coming up together there, but that's something where we probably need to look at the specific query to really see what's happening.
Right, I'm asking because one of my clients he was like on the first page for a certain product query, just for the product name, and then he totally disappeared, which didn't make any sense, but I noticed that if I use the filter equals 0 parameter, he actually appears back. So I was trying to figure out whether, for example, if we change the description to make it more original, would Google consider that, okay, so it's not the same, maybe it brings some extra value, so we will show it back into the...
That could be the case, yeah.
Yeah. No.
Okay, let's see. On our site, we use rich snippets, aggregate review, and aggregate rating and review. I read in the Google tutorial we should show all reviews on one page, but we get some really heavy pages because of that. Can we use pagination? Yes, you can use pagination. About events in a knowledge graph, in a search for venue name, the list of upcoming events comes up. If there are two major ticketers for the venue, what are the criteria for influencing which one is referenced for the events information? As far as I know, this is essentially just a ranking question. So it's like which of these results would you rank first? And the one that we would rank first is the one that we would generally show as a link there. I can double check if you have a specific query, if you post in the forum or if you send me that directly. But in general, that's how we pick these things. In the apps box on mobile search on an Apple device, is Google able to consider location when ranking the apps, or does it just pull the rankings from the App Store? I'm searching for a weather app in Google Canada, but the top apps are all from the US. I don't actually know how we use location for those kind of things. For things like the content on the Play Store, we can pull out the hreflang information from there and use that to help with the rankings. But I don't know how we would do that from the Apple Store, for example. So I can't really help with that. What should we do and how should we inform Google if we think negative SEO has been conducted against our site? So in general, we're pretty good at picking this up and just handling it appropriately on our side. If you think that it is causing problems, I'd recommend posting in the Webmaster Help forums or sending that directly to me. I can take a look at that and send that off to the team to kind of check out. In pretty much all of the cases that I've run across, we've been able to figure this out on our own with our algorithm, so it's not usually something that you really need to worry about. If you think this is negative SEO with regards to links specifically, you can always just put those in the disavow file, and then we'll ignore that as well. The Google search results are being hijacked more and more. We found lots of hacked sites, for example, and I listed a detailed thread. So we also see a lot of sites getting hacked more and more. It's really something that has been a trend for a while now, but it is worrying. And I think as a webmaster, it's frustrating if your site gets hacked, and if you see kind of these hijacking things that are being posted about in that thread, then that's something that is is kind of worrying if you feel that that's happening to your site. In general, we're able to pick these things up fairly quickly, and we're working on making that even faster, more automated. So that's something that should help there. But I think the general trend with regards to hacking is still something that is definitely on our mind, and we know that it does cause a lot of problems in search, specifically when pretty good websites get hacked. It's sometimes really hard to figure out what does that actually mean. How should we respond to that? The store we acquired a few months ago was punished by Penguin in 2014 due to mistakes from the previous owner. We fixed all these issues, and we're waiting for an update. Can we get a manual update? So we don't do manual updates for a lot of our algorithms. We essentially wait for the algorithms to get updated to run automatically. So there is no manual update that's possible in cases like this. If you fix all the issues and with the next update, then that'll probably look a little bit better. I don't have any timing on these updates when they're not announced yet. Is it possible to gain a filter or penalty from an A/B split testing and accidentally pushing majority of the traffic to the site for a few days? If so, how can we remove it? So from a manual action point of view, I don't think you would get a manual action for this kind of A/B testing. There might be some situations where the manual website team is a bit confused about what's actually happening there, but in general, we recognize that people want to do A/B testing, and that's okay with us. We just require that you treat Googlebot like a normal user from the same location. So if you're doing an A/B test for users in the US, then Googlebot would need to be a part of that group as well. What can also happen with A/B testing is that we actually see the new content as well. So that's something where if the new content is significantly different than the old content, or like the A/B parts, then that can happen that we index that content and that we try to rank that content appropriately, where you might have essentially both versions available. So taking an extreme example, you have a page that has a lot of text on it, a lot of good information, and your B version that you're testing is essentially just an image. And in cases like that, if we start to focus on the B version because we get put into that test as well, then obviously that's what we're going to be ranking, and we're not going to have a lot of stuff to rank with there. And for these cases, there's no manual way to kind of get out of that. Essentially, you put up the new content, and you let us index that, and we can go from there. There was a question about custom search engine not working on our site for some browsers. If you see that happen, maybe it's worth posting in the forum for the custom search engine. I don't know if we have a specific forum for CSE at the moment. If you can't find a place to post in the forum, feel free to ping me directly on Google+, and I'll try to find someone internally to help with that. I see a lot of 404 errors on my site in Search Console. It turns out that Googlebot is bad in indexing PDFs with links that wrap over to a new line. The links work fine in Acrobat. Is there a chance to get this annoying bug fixed? Pretty please. Maybe. It's sometimes tricky to recognize where these specific links are coming from. So specifically with regards to things like PDFs or text files in general, we will try to recognize URLs that are in the text itself, and we will try to recognize URLs that are actually linked properly. So what might be happening here is that we pick up the normal links, we can crawl those, but we also notice that there is like the URL in text on these pages, and we try to pick those out and crawl those as well. And what might be happening there is that we just kind of break the URL while picking it out from the text. So that's something where we're probably already picking up the proper links anyway, and these are just additional links that we also find in these PDFs that we try to pick up and follow as well. So it's not so much that we aren't able to pick it up, but that we're picking up others as well. And this is similar to other web pages where maybe the URL is listed as text. Sometimes web pages kind of abbreviate a URL that they put ... in the middle, and then we think, oh, well, this is a unique URL we've never seen before. We'll try to pick it up for indexing as well. But it turns out it leads to a 404. And from our point of view, that's perfectly fine. We found something, we thought we'd double check it, we saw a 404, life goes on. That's not something that would cause any problems. But if you have specific PDF files where you see this happening, I'd love to take a look just to make sure that it's really working as expected and not something that we actually do need to fix, because that can be somewhat tricky to recognize externally. So if you have specific PDFs where we're doing this wrong, feel free to send one to me or send me the link, and I can take a look at that, and we can go from there. There were also a bunch of other questions that were submitted that I'm essentially going to be skipping. So it kind of starts with the general theme of when is Google going to be more transparent with what we need to rank well. We need more information in Search Console, better and more documentation, and less cryptic answers, John. So from my point of view, a lot of the questions that we sometimes get in these Hangouts and on Twitter or elsewhere are fairly theoretical in nature, in the sense that which technical trick can I use on my website to make Google think that my pages are more relevant, that my pages are suddenly more important for users? And in a lot of cases, there might be some technical tweaks that you can do to kind of like trick Google's algorithms and rank one point higher than you would otherwise. But for the most part, these are things where if you're focusing on all of these technical details, like, I don't know, should I capitalize my keywords? Should I list them alphabetically? Should I put my keywords in H1 tags on top of the page or as a second line of the page? These are all things that don't really change how relevant your pages are for users. So what happens there is you spend a lot of time on all of these technical tweaks that don't actually improve your content, that don't actually improve your website in general. And maybe it'll happen that they rank one slot higher. Maybe they're just theoretically a tiny bit better than the page without those tweaks. But in the long run, these are things that are going to change in our algorithms over time, where the engineers are going to look at it and say, well, maybe this isn't actually a sign of a website being more relevant, more useful to users if the keyword is in the first place on H1. Maybe we should look at the second keyword or the third keyword, or maybe we should skip the H1s altogether. So these are things where, for a large part, you're spending your time chasing something that's changing all the time. And I think for normal websites, that's kind of the wrong approach. You should be spending your time to make your website better, and that should be, in turn, something that our algorithms pick up and that they should be picking up a little bit better over time. So instead of figuring out, like, which keyword should I put in my H1, and should I put external links that are followed or not followed, because I heard that Google sometimes takes external links into account, or how long should my pages be, what should my keyword density be. All of these are things where you could spend a lot of time working on that, but users are not going to notice any significant improvement on your site. So essentially, in the long run, it's a lot of work that you're doing for nothing. So that's kind of why I'm skipping a lot of these.
John, what do you think would happen if you did actually release absolutely everything, and suddenly everyone knew exactly how it worked? Do you think what would essentially happen is no one would be surprised, and you should just carry on doing what you're doing anyway? Because the things that make you rank are the things that, you know,
I mean,
quality content, news articles, links from authoritative sites. None of this would be news to people, and surely people would just carry on as they were.
I think a lot of the rational webmasters would probably just carry on and say, well, I'll just continue making a good site. But they're definitely, I'd say a lot of people would be tempted to say, well, Google is trying to recognize the quality of my site based on the number of commas that I include in my sentences. Therefore, I will put more commas in my sentences. And
wait, are you saying that Google does do that?
no, I mean it's just as an example. You know, it's something where if we release what we actually use to recognize the quality of a website, then people would be trying to gain those specific factors, and we'd have to figure out a new way to recognize the quality of a website because it wouldn't be based on that.
But presumably the factors you can't gain, which is real authority, I'll use it in a smaller percentage of the overall algorithm anyway, so it wouldn't make much difference.
I don't know.
Some things you can't fake. You can't fake 10 years of authority and brand overnight.
Well, you could buy like an old site, right? And say, well, we're just rebranding and now we're selling pharmaceuticals, but we're actually a 10-year-old site.
Yeah, but you're telling me Google can't tell that as well. So you would release that. If you're talking full disclosure, so Google would know that.
I think there are a lot of factors where we try to look at the bigger picture, but we have to use small technical elements to kind of understand that picture. It's not yet at the case that we have this big AI box that looks at your website and knows exactly what you've been doing for the last 10 years and how we should treat that.
Go for that.
I think that would be kind of tricky and probably more problematic than it would be useful. But, I mean, we kind of have to look at small technical elements to figure out, to find ways to recognize if a site is relevant, if it has authority. It's not something like a meta tag that's on your site that you can't fake. We have to kind of understand where does this come from, what should we be looking at. But these are things that change over time. So if we see that everyone is, I don't know, putting a friendly picture on their websites, and we think, oh, friendly pictures are a sign that this website is friendly, we should rank it higher, then maybe we need to kind of rethink what we're using for ranking, because that's no longer a real signal that it's actually useful or relevant for us in search. But it's I don't know, it's tricky because on the other hand, we do give out information like that as well, where we say, well, HTTPS is a ranking factor for us, and then people go off and do HTTPS instead of improving their website. So it's
so being a factor, being a factor could be a factor of 1% or 100%, and you still have to take a broad approach, surely.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, there wouldn't be these technical ranking factors. We would just be able to figure it out, I don't know, somehow magically, but that world hasn't happened yet.
But you are close to doing that, though.
Sorry?
You are close to doing that, though, figuring out almost magically whether a site has the quality required to rank better.
I think we've definitely moved a lot more in that direction over time, and there are a lot of things that have helped us in that regard, where we don't have to like count the words or count the keyword frequency to actually say, oh, well, this is a good page, we should rank it. But that's something that also works together with the webmasters, where if we can see that people are making really fantastic websites and we're not showing them properly in search, then that's something that we need to say, well, why aren't we recognizing this as being something fantastic? Why are we not doing our users a favor by not recommending this site in search?
I don't know if you saw the link I posted in chat at the beginning of the call. Maybe you've seen it this week. It was posted like Tuesday or Wednesday. It's basically, Will Critchlow, the founder and CEO of Still, made a prediction that essentially you're going to rely more and more on rank rank to kind of decide what results how results should be ranked, and everything else, all the factors that are currently used to rank results, will basically feed directly into RankBrain, which will then decide whether a result should rank higher or not, and the weights it should apply to each factor. So, for example, links would be fed directly into RankBrain, and it will decide whether they should be taken into account or not. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of this already. We have a lot of different factors that we take into account, and we don't like always say, well, this site has 5 links, this site has 4 links, therefore this is better. For some queries or some sites, it makes sense to focus less on links and more on other factors. But these are, I think, almost like organic evolution changes in the way ranking happens. So it's not that we're switching to an artificial intelligence machine that does everything correctly automatically, but we kind of have to learn this from time to time.
Okay,
but I thought the timing was really interesting because I think a couple days later we said, well, time to retire PageRank in the toolbar, right? So it's almost like he has a leak somewhere from Google. I don't know what he's doing there.
Oh, well, he mostly concentrates on the fact that RankBrain will become eventually the main ranking factor. That it will be the I don't know, most weighted factor in deciding where a result should rank.
I suspect machine learning stuff will definitely gain more prominence in the search results. I know Bing, for example, does a lot with machine learning as well. I think Yandex does as well. It definitely has a lot of interesting use cases for situations where we need a system to kind of react to something that we haven't seen before. And with RankBrain, that's something that we do with the queries, for example, where if someone searches for something that we've never seen before, which happens, I don't know, what is it, like 10% of the time every day, some number like that, then we don't really have any existing algorithm that we can apply and just say, well, we've never seen this query before, but we'll assume that this is the right thing to show, that this is what the user is searching for. So having kind of a machine learning system behind that, I think definitely makes sense. For other aspects, I don't know if it makes sense. Like if we have 2 URLs and we have to decide which one is canonical, can we just use like a simple algorithm, or do we have to train a machine learning model to pick the right canonical? Probably the simple technical model works just as well and a lot easier and fewer problems. But I don't know. These are things that have to be tried out, I think, over time. For us, I think one aspect is really important is that we're able to figure out why things are happening the way they are, so that if someone reports something to us, we can go back and say, well, that was because this and this and this decision that we made, and maybe we should revisit that decision and change that again. Whereas if someone comes to us with a query and says, well, I got these results, and we say, well, I don't know, we see something completely different, we have no idea where these results are coming from, then that's really hard to debug and to improve. It's like you can't go back to the artificial intelligence box and say, oh, that one time, 5 billion queries ago, you gave the wrong results. You should learn to change that. It's like, it's really hard to kind of follow back. And some of these wrong results might be due to things that webmasters do wrong, like maybe a no index, a bad canonical, a bad hreflang, or bad geotargeting, or whatever. And we'd like to get that information back to webmasters as well. So we need to kind of understand what happened, why did it go wrong, and what should we do to change that.
So you're not using it so much, I mean RankBrain, you're not using it so much for more generic queries that have a high search volume and that you already have the factors built in place to do it.
I think the easy answer for me would be to say, yes, we use it everywhere, because then I wouldn't have to talk about factors. But I think this is something that just needs to be kind of tested over time. It's not something where I'd say, well, it works for 5% of the queries, therefore we'll use it for 95. That's something where we do a lot of tests to make sure that we're doing the right thing for search. And a lot of these tests lead to surprising results, and we have to rethink our ideas around that. And it's also something where we try to keep things as simple as possible. So if we have multiple algorithms that do the same thing, then at some point we should say, well, this one is actually doing the same as the other one here. Maybe we should retire the other one. OK, more questions from you all. What all did I miss? Seems the Q&A widget still isn't loading for me. Oh, well, bummer. Let me see. Are no-follow links a ranking factor? Only do-follow links carry search visibility? Yes, only the normal followed links pass PageRank, so that's essentially where we pick up the PageRank and we kind of follow that. So if it's a no-follow link, we essentially drop that from our link graph.
I have one more question. This is client related. I've talked about this before. I just want to get your opinion. So the client used to be on first domain. I messaged you in the chat, and they used to do some spam link building. They had a manual penalty as well. And when we came on board, we offered them the option of switching to a new domain, start up fresh, and we did. And it went pretty well. We have a lot more traffic than the previous domain. It's just that for the main keywords that their business is targeting, we seem to always rank around where the first domain used to rank, so which is pretty low. And I was wondering, is Google kind of seeing any connection and kind of deciding where this domain ranks here, so this other domain that looks very similar should also rank here, or something like that?
So these are totally unrelated otherwise, or?
Well, so
it's not like a redirect or site move or anything?
No, there's no redirect, no link between them as far as I know. We try to keep them separate. The HTML is a bit different. Should we no index the first site just to make sure? I don't know.
Usually we should be treating them separately in a case like that. If you essentially started off with a new website on a new domain, then that's something we treat separately. But that's also something where, again, it takes a while to kind of build up that stronger presence, especially if there's a lot of competition in that area. Then that's something where you wouldn't expect that to kind of just swap over and say, well, suddenly this website ranks really well. But in general, if there are no redirects, if there's no connection between the old site and new site, then we would treat that as a separate site.
Right. You also mentioned at some point that if there would be a connection between the two sites, you would see in the search console, in the links to the site, you would see the links from the old site that also in the new site's account.
That's a good trick. Yeah.
So we don't see that. So I assume that.
Yeah, I think we're just ranking it where we think we should normally rank it. So
okay.
it's.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that there's no need of any technical changes to be made.
Sure. All right. More questions from you all.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Is there at any time in the future are you going to show whether links that appear in Search Console are followed or not, or that you're taking them into account or not?
We've talked about this a few times with the team to see what we can do there, because we know people are curious about this or want to understand which links are really relevant for their site with regards to search and which ones aren't. At the moment, we show both of them primarily because we think, well, these are links that are to your site, and maybe you'd like to know that they exist, regardless of whether or not they're no-followed. So that's something where I don't expect to see big changes in the near future. I think that's something where the team is saying, well, this kind of works well enough. We don't want to encourage people to focus too much on links because then they go off and do crazy stuff. So instead, we'll put our priorities more on maybe newer features in Search Console or kind of other revised features there. But this is something I think at some point I saw a browser plugin that highlights these differently. That's something that might make sense. Maybe it makes sense to just download them and kind of double check them with a script quickly so that you have a nice table to kind of better understand what's actually happening there. All right, I need to quit a little bit early because I need to head off to another meeting. But it's been great talking to you all again. Thanks for submitting all the questions. Sorry that the Q&A widget wasn't working here. But I'll set up the next Hangouts as well, and we can check out whatever questions we might have missed at that point. All right. I wish you all a great weekend.
Thanks, John.
And see you again in one of the future Hangouts.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, John. Yeah.